like hate is probably a trending word these last year for
Maybe.
sure. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of Fire Pit Chat. I'm Joe, and I'm here with Ben. Ben, how you doing?
Doing well, Joe. Good to be back.
Good to be here. I was trying to think. What's coming up soon? Oh, oh, that's right. The baseball season. No, no, no. Oh, now there's a big, obviously here in the U.S., big election cycles coming toward an end at some point. And so what I wanted to do was put together some tools or some thoughts about the upcoming election. So
Yep.
this may not age well. These series of recordings may not age well, but I have a feeling that the emotions and the experiences of the election season up till now, certainly with the overlap of the pandemic, I think they may be in people's psyche and soul for a long time. So it may not age well, but we're probably going to talk a little bit more and give some more real world examples as we're talking today, and it may have to do with the election. What do you think about that, Ben?
I think it's great, and I think, as you said, some of the emotional experiences that we have going into this particular election, and some of the social and relational things that it brings up, and some of the even larger conceptual stuff. I mean, that we're going to be facing these things cyclically and to some extent even constantly going forward. So yeah, I'm hopeful that this will be something that's useful well beyond this coming Tuesday.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So our first topic for today is called hateful or hate fueled. Can a candidate, leader, acquaintance, or person in our life fuel hate in us? Does anyone have the power to fuel the feeling of hate inside of us? If I feel hate, is that an internal feeling or is that created externally? Do I have any control over the feelings of extreme hatred? What resources exist for me to help myself when I feel such a strong emotion, such as hate? Is retreat from a person that triggers me healthy? And what can I learn to help myself when I feel so strongly? So this came up for me. I've been seeing a lot of things, and there's a lot of a lot of comments and a lot going on. But someone said that a certain person fueled the hate,
Mm.
and I started thinking about that. Is
Mm.
if there's no hate, so if think of it as a fire, right? So fuel,
Yep.
right? If there's no kindling inside me, or there's any fat wood or newspaper, and a
Yep.
flame comes in, like if there's water, all that flame could come in, but it's not going to do anything. So
Yes.
I started thinking about that, and it seems like hate is probably a trending word these last year for
Maybe.
sure. And what do you think about hate? Can someone fuel hate, or if that hate is inside me, can I acknowledge that that person is fueling or touching something, touching that kindling inside of me and making it burn, but ultimately is getting rid of that person out of my life going to help me with that kindling that's inside of me?
This is I think, a complex question because, yes, I mean, in one sense, I agree with you completely that there, where there's no fuel, there can't be fire. It's a little perhaps more complex on the ground in that there are things that evoke in us a moral reaction, and that's not a bad thing. In fact, I think we've discussed this before. If you don't ever experience anger, for example, that's really probably a moral defect, because the ability to recognize that something is morally not as it ought to be, that something's just wrong, and in fact really wrong, and it needs to be responded to, that recognition in itself is just part of moral health. But then hate, it seems to me, and you've already put your finger on this, it's going well beyond just that moral response of seeing injustice and having a moral reaction to it. And it goes deeper, and it becomes focused on people, and it begins to sort of burn out of control in our hearts. And so I think it's maybe a little bit of both. And I do think that there are things that can evoke responses from us, but I think where we go with those responses, whether our anger moves towards justice or simply meets injustice with more injustice, that I think is where we need to ask ourselves the question of, okay, if I've got fuel inside of me for that kind of rage and hatred and unjust responses to injustice, that's something I need to look at inside of me. And I don't think it's, I think it's blame shifting to point the finger at the provocateur.
Well, right. Hate is consuming
Yeah.
me, right? So
Yes.
my hate consumes me,
Yes.
and so I become ineffectual. My
Yes.
righteous anger over injustice can fuel me to spur change or action.
Yep.
But hate is burning me up on the inside. And I just know for myself when I'm in that place of hate, and I certainly do, I'm
Yep.
human,
Yep.
right? When I'm in that place of hate, I notice that I can't act or react in a productive way. And I
Precisely.
start to lose my critical thinking. I start
Yep.
to lose my rationality, and it
Yep.
becomes this explosion, and it's
Yep.
internal. And
Right.
so I have to, for myself, believe that I have to see that hate in me,
Mm.
because then I think the tendency is to then take that internal explosion and burn everyone else around me.
Right. And that's, at that point, you're not able to contribute any love, any goodness, as you said, anything productive. So yeah, and that's and at that point to say, well, that's because of this person or this whatever outside of me, I just think badly misses the point. Somehow, we've maybe said this in previous episodes. If buttons are being pushed, it's because you've got buttons to push, and so that's something that has to be dealt with internally. And then, then you get into the question of, well, then how, as you work on those internal things, how do you respond, let's say, to the person that you are reacting against? And there's some kind of deep practical questions, but you have to start with what's going on inside of you. I wish I had no experience with this, Joe. I really do.
No, me too. Well, so, and I think that's a great point in that I think I need to look at that person or that. Look, I think right now it's really focused on the candidates, right? So we are going to talk a little bit more about the election. So that's it's focused on the candidates, and it also could be just people in our life. It could be people that are family members posting on Facebook or our good friends posting on Twitter. So and it could evoke that feeling of hate. And so I think that for myself, when we talk about retreat from that person, retreat is easier depending on the person, right? So if the politics is what's fueling this hate in me, that is burning me up and consuming me, then I can turn off that news. I can turn off that Twitter feed or that
Mhm.
Facebook feed and
Mhm.
turn that off. I think the fear that comes with that is I'm going to miss something or
Yep.
something's going to happen I'm not going to know about. And I think that's a place where greater faith has to come in, and where I need to focus in on this is my hate. And until I can put out the flame of my hate inside of me, I
Mm.
really can't be part of that global stage.
Yeah.
And I need faith to do that, because
Yeah.
otherwise I'm just going to be throwing up on everyone.
Yes. Well, yeah, and I think maybe it's one consideration is, so what if I'm feeling anger, I'm feeling hate, I'm clearly in reaction mode to something. What then is my responsibility? What could I do that's constructive? I find that sometimes, just what you were saying, sometimes for me, I realize, like, let's say I'm on social media and I'm seeing stuff that's just driving me wild. There's almost nothing I can really do constructively about any of that. And so it's perfectly fine. Just shut it off. I don't seem to have the emotional wherewithal to read this stuff, view this stuff, be immersed in this stuff, and stay calm and collected. So just turn it off. Of course, in personal relationships where something's going on between you and another person that you're fairly close to, and you're having anger, whether it's at real injustice or just perceived injustice or whatever, and there's rage, and you're feeling all of this angst, there, of course, just like turning off my wife and children is not an option, let's say, or a
Right.
good friend. I have to, but there I have more obvious ways of doing justice, of finding ways to move toward this person constructively and trying to really drive out the anger and the hatred with forms of love. And there I think you can actually do something. So some of it I think is just contextual, and getting a sense of your obligations within the context.
Well, it's that commonality. And I know you've spoken
Yes.
about a lot of this in the sermons, right? So there's find that commonality. I mean, I've had arguments with my wife. We've been together 26 years. And
Hmm.
there were have some times where I really felt entrenched in that argument.
Yeah.
I had to remind myself that is my wife. I love
Hmm.
her.
Hmm.
And so that's sometimes that's a commonality. It could
Yep.
be that's my friend. That could be that's my sibling. And that the only commonality we have in that moment is that we have the same parent,
Yes.
or we go to the same church, or
Yes.
whatever that is. But that's the opening, right? So when I find that commonality, that's the opening for me to spread that out. But when I'm not looking for that commonality, I'm just being in hate. And that's my hate.
Hmm.
not necessarily the other person. And that's where we lose that connection and lose that ability to spread love or spread the word or do anything
Yeah.
constructive.
Yeah. Right. And related to that, I think we have to ask ourselves quite often, like, what's my objective here? I'm feeling all of, I'm feeling all of this emotion, and I actually want to do something with it. That's kind of what that kind of fiery emotion, it sort of seeks a vent. But what's my objective? Anyone can stand and scream and throw dust in the air and just generally create a scene. But what am I after here? And if it's not obvious that there's any real clear positive objective to move toward, then that might be a place to just step away, just go cool down and find something else to think about. But in personal relationships, I think you can begin to ask yourself, like you were just saying, like, this is my wife, this is my child, this is my friend, this is my sibling, whatever. What's my goal in this relationship? What do I hope to contribute? Am I looking to come to a place where we've actually talked this through? Am I looking just to kind of get things back to some degree of calm where we might never really discuss and thrash something through, but we can at least just settle down and
Right.
agree to disagree. What's the objective? And then I think from that you can begin to take all that energy and do something with it.
Focusing on the long game.
Right.
Right. So
Right.
so in this moment, and that's hard to do. It's
Man.
really hard to do. It takes, and when I've triggered one of those spot prayers, God help me with this,
Hmm.
I'm better at it.
Yep.
But thinking of the long game. So in this moment, I'm really jazzed up. And like you said, I could walk away.
Yeah.
But also is the long game is, this is my wife, this is my parent, this is my child, this is my good friend, 20 years, whatever that is.
Yeah.
And this too shall pass. It's hard in that moment, and there needs to be that stronger desire, I think,
Mhm.
or the stronger reminder of the long game that this person in front of me isn't an object. This is a person
Yes.
that I love.
One thing that's helped me with that is just, and I may have said this before, but just I often find myself asking, what kind of a relationship do I want to have with this person in 5 years? And just like really think about that,
Right.
because it really brings me back from that instinctive reaction in the moment where I might just be willing to burn a bridge or just lash out. And somehow in my head that makes sense on the kind of 20-minute scale of things. When I step back to the 5 year scale, there is, wait a minute,
Right.
that is not going to lead me in the direction I want to be in 5 years. I would also just back up to maybe less personal context though, and say I'm not wanting to imply that I don't think you could have constructive action in response to outrage that you feel on kind of the societal scale. I mean, maybe you realize, what? I think I need to get more involved in my local political scene, or I should start a blog. I think I've got some things I'd like to say that maybe, some readership might form, and it might actually be this might be a way to build something, or even like what we're trying to do here, just having conversations that are a little more public. I think that all can be very fruitful. So
I agree. And so the reason why I picked hateful or hate fuel first was I found that for myself when I could be most effective is when I've cleared out that hate. So
yes.
if I get involved with politics or if I get involved with a community organization or if I get involved with my church from that place of that hate where that hate hasn't been extinguished yet, and
Hmm.
I'm using hate to be more
Hmm.
global until I own and see my own faith and get help for it, I'm going to bring that hate to those organizations. I'm going to
Yes.
bring that hate to the group, and that's why the most my wife and I over the years have done various different things to work on our relationship. And at one point we got into couples therapy, and the couple therapist basically said, you guys don't have a problem in your relationship. You guys just have your own problems. So you just need to work on your own problems and your
Yeah.
relationship will work itself out. And
Yeah.
so that's the thing here I'm thinking about is that,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. And we're going to cover that is I'll speak for myself, will be most effective when I've got that relationship, when I built that relationship inside
Yep.
of myself
Yep.
so that I'm not throwing up on everybody. And and
Yes.
and I've gotten off Twitter and I won't post on Facebook regularly, if at all, because many times when I had in the past, people threw up on me and it just didn't feel
Mm-hmm.
good.
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to bring that inside. Let me get to that place of spiritual centeredness, groundedness. I'm not always there. I'm not there that often, but I try to get there. And so from that foundation, right, that bedrock foundation, then I could do many things to
Yeah.
change the world. It feels like what I see in social media now is people are going there with their hate, thinking that everyone else is starting or causing their hate, and they're
Hmm.
now going to spread more hate.
Hmm. Do you think you mentioned before the show the word patience? Do
Mm.
you think that part of the problem with hate is that it's just so hasty? I mean, when I and I think we've talked about how our world kind of um, I think it creates a lot of context where hasty responses are kind of encouraged. You know, when I feel rage, I feel hate. There's something in me that just wants to act immediately. Like I'm gonna squash this right now. And I think that part of getting a hold of your internal reactions, maybe, is just stepping back and waiting, and then putting yourself in a situation where when you respond, you're able to respond in the kinds of ways that are going to be a lot slower. They're going to take more investment over more time, but in the end, they're going to build. As opposed to this, I'm going to, send that one tweet that's just going to be like lights out, or, this blog post is going to start a reformation, or what. I remember years ago this realization when as a pastor and a preacher that I was trying to start a reformation with every sermon, and it was just insane.
Right.
And I just needed to kind of like step back and realize where part of how I discipline my own internal life is kind of just stepping back and asking myself, like, where can I go connect to the world and contribute in ways that are not going to fix anything dramatically, but maybe over time I can actually be an influence for good. And I actually think part of the American obsession with big political events like this election is kind of the hope that we're going to get the one big thing that kind of is the watershed, and it's all different after that. And I think that it just kind of shows how emotionally invested we are in these things. And I don't know, do you see that connection between kind of hate and just
Absolutely.
this
Yeah.
yeah.
We talked about patience. And for me, patience is difficult. I'm better at patience when there's a context or a framework
Yep.
within. And we talked, I mentioned earlier before about the long game. So I'm old enough to remember that I had to write a letter. So if somebody really upset me, I had to take pen to paper.
Mm-hmm.
And throughout that whole time, my heart rate would slow down. A lot of things would slow down. And then when I
Yep.
was done writing that letter, I had to look at that letter, then I had to get an envelope and a stamp. And usually it could pull that back to, oh man, I can finally see maybe I was wrong.
Yep.
Man, if I read that over and say, if I send that, that's a problem.
Yep.
Today, as you said, with Twitter, I can bang out 240 characters really quick, hit send before I even, it's
Mm-hmm.
almost like a blackout or a whiteout.
Yes. That's
I send it and then I read it. I don't know. I don't know if people, this relates to people. When I was active on Twitter, I'd send it, then read it.
Yeah.
Doesn't make
Ready
any
to game.
sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I do. I think patience is just not the way our world is organized or structured around today. And I think it's really important. I mean, we try to teach that to our children. We have to be patient. Used to be we'd have to save money to buy things, and now we all have credit and can overextend credit.
Right.
And I'm not saying those are bad things, but I do think it creates that feeling of patience. And for me, when I lose the patience, I lose sight of the framework that I need to live in. And
Yeah.
I think that if there isn't any framework, hate can really grow inside of me.
Well, that's where I would say I don't think it's the triggers, it's the flashpoints that actually fuel the hate. I do think our lifestyle as a whole, kind of our cultural forms, become a kind of fuel for hatred because you realize you're just speeding up and speaking for myself, I'm speeding up and winding up inside in ways where all of a sudden if someone says the wrong thing, I am just stunningly ready to rumble. And that's, life architecture can become a kind of fuel. It's still ultimately on me. I mean, that reaction is still in my heart. But if I've set up my life where I'm just in hurry mode, I'm just like I can just tell when I have a certain level of internal intensity fueled by my habits. And then mercy, if someone says the wrong thing, it's over.
Yeah, so we are knee deep in the election season here. I know I've heard from a lot of people feeling hate or hateful or hate fueled. Hopefully, this was helpful for you. I guess I would say, I think retreat is healthy. Certainly, if it's not someone who's in your life, someone in your life, I think searching for commonality. How
Yes.
can I connect with that person? I think looking for the greater framework. Why am I here? What do I
Yes.
believe in? What are my morals and values? Does this person in the past, even though I may think they're totally crazy, do they embody those morals and values too? Are they a sibling? Are they a parent? Are they a spouse
Mhm.
or child? And look for that commonality. And I would say that, for myself, when I feel those strong feelings, I try to take it inside. I may do a spot check prayer. Hey, God,
Mhm.
help me with this. I'm feeling really hateful right now, and
Mhm.
I don't want to go there. So I think there's a bunch of things we can do, and hopefully this is helpful for people. If you're feeling that way, talk about it. We're going to talk about some more resources and tools here in our next couple episodes that we're going to string together for Election Day. Ben, any other final thoughts you had on hate and hateful or hate fueled?
No, I think the synopsis you just gave is brilliant, and it's helpful to me. And yeah, I'm looking forward to more conversations.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody, and have a great day.